yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello and welcome to Jen Taylor Rerouting, where being rude is never acceptable, but sarcasm is welcome and swearing isn't always a bad option. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me on Jen Taylor Rerouting. My goal is that every guest becomes a friend, and I feel truly blessed to know the people that I've interviewed. If you want to know more information about me, from being a guest on this show to my virtual assistant services for podcasters, or perhaps you want to be a published author, I have coaching and ghostwriting services for that. You can find everything that you want to know on jentaylor.net. Remember to give a shout out, share, like, give me some feedback on all of my interviews. I'm happy to join in on a conversation with you. Have a great day. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing and having as my guest, Olivia Baylor. Olivia, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. We were glitching out here because I had a toilet leak, which is always, life is always exciting. Mm-hmm. And you actually have a website called liferevisions.com. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so I offer counseling in Catonsville, Maryland. I work with LGBTQ, heterosexual couples as well, LGBTQ and polyamorous couples. And I also work with some individuals that are going through gender identification.
How did you begin that journey? You are a therapist. You have lots of letters behind your name. Explain to me all the letters behind your name so people know.
Okay, so the LCPC, so I'm licensed in the state of Maryland to practice.
Okay.
The NCC is the National Certified Counselor, so I had to take that lovely long exam to get those 3 titles at the end of my name. And the DCC means I'm a Certified Distance Counselor. Sometimes when I work with a couple of individuals who may be in the military, if they're on base in their home state is Maryland, they will see me for therapy. If I have some business individuals who are in the corporate field, sometimes they can't actually make it into the office for therapy. Just that drive from their office building to my office is just too much for them time-wise. We'll conduct therapy via video session. So similar to this.
Yes, I didn't know I was getting therapy today. So you grew up in New Jersey, and I'm from New England also. So I understand people that are not from New England don't understand what a different attitude there is. When were you born?
I was born, what year? 1984.
Okay. That just gives people an idea because they can't see us. Yeah. So 1984 in New Jersey, and tell me what that was like, because you had a Nigerian dad, and I'm thinking that was a strong influence. So let's start going through that process, that history.
Yes, I come from a very unique background. My father is Nigerian and has some Spanish in him as well, which is a whole nother story. And my mother is actually from South Carolina, so she is a very strict Southern woman. And I was raised in New Jersey. So I didn't have the same amount of opportunity as other kids who could run around and just, I'll be back tomorrow. I'll come back, 9, 10 o'clock. My parents were very strict when it came to education. They were very strict when it came to following rules. And it did cause a little bit of struggle as I was growing up. But now as an adult, I appreciate it because I kind of see what they were trying to do.
What now? A Southern belle? How did they meet?
So when my father came over to the States, he actually was he joined the military. So he's a Vietnam veteran, and when he was in base in South Carolina, I can't remember the exact base that he was at. He went out. They would go out to party, and my mom was there, and she met him at the same time. She always used to say, I really didn't like your father when I first met him. He was just a very cocky individual, but it works out. They're the yin and the yang. She can be very calm at times, but she can also be very strict. And he's comes from just very strict. He's just strict all around. Very structured type of a person.
Okay, so you weren't allowed to do as much as other kids. You're talking about freedom in going out and doing stuff. Did you go to prom? What could you and could you not do?
I did go to prom. You know, I could go out with my friends, but my parents were very big on knowing the parents of my friends. They knew my friends at the same time. They were like, if I'm not friends with your friends, it's not happening. If I don't know who their parents are and I'm not friends with their parents, you're not going out with them. They just came from an area, you know, where my mom in the South, it was you don't trust everybody. And my dad, who came from Nigeria, it's like you don't trust everybody. So they were strict on, I wasn't able to like just jump on the bus and go places. As you know, New Jersey public transportation is very easily accessible. It wasn't something that we did. My parents took me there, watched me walk out, you know, and so forth. So it did create, sometimes with my friends, they were like, well, how come you can't just go and just meet us there? It was like, nope, either your parents have to come and pick me up or my parent has to drop me off.
Right. Yeah, that was pretty strict back then because we were kind of given free reign in the 80s to, that it wasn't the same as it is now. Now we should be meeting the parents and we tend to not do it. Mm-hmm. Back then it was probably a lot safer, and the public transportation was amazing. So did you have siblings?
Yes, I have 3 brothers.
Tell me where you are in order.
I'm the youngest and the only girl, so I'm the baby of the family.
Was that must have made things worse then?
Oh, it did. Very did.
Yeah, I imagine that did not make things easier for you. And then now you live in Maryland now. Tell me about college. They were very big on education. That clearly turned out well for you.
Yeah. Yeah, my brothers went to public school, but my families felt that, they were boys, so they can handle the public school environment. Me as a girl, when it came to my time to I was in elementary school. They put me in a private elementary school around 4th grade or so. And then when it was time for me to go to high school, and for everybody out there in New Jersey, when I went to school, K through 8 was one school. Now it's, elementary and middle, but we all went to one school. When it was time for me to go to high school, my brother said, nope, she's not going to a public high school. She needs to go to a private high school. So I went to a private high school. After that, I went to undergrad in psychiatry in Pittsburgh, which was another private college. Once I left there, I went to get my master's at University of Baltimore in criminal justice. And then I went back to school and got my master's in mental health therapy from Capella University. So my parents always pushed for, you don't want to repeat the cycle that we were in. My grandmother, she only had a 3rd grade education. My mom and my dad at the time when they were raising us, they didn't they went to some college, but they didn't finish. And so they waited until, me and my 3 brothers got done with school before they went back to school. My dad is actually going for his doctorate now. And and my mom went back for her early childhood education degree, but they waited until we were done. So they kept telling us, we don't want you to repeat what happened in the past. We want to advance further. And that was something my grandmother pushed too, my maternal grandmother. I don't want you to have just a 3rd grade education. I want you to have more than that because I want more to come from you and your family. So they pushed education very much for us.
Did they see that, I think, as a way out? I mean, your dad in Nigeria, there's a lot of political unrest there and a skewed caste system. Mm-hmm. And then in the South with your mom, I don't know what that was like for her growing up, but there weren't as many opportunities.
Yeah.
Especially for a woman, especially for a woman of color, that was not something that she was probably even able to do to the extent that you were.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So at what point did you feel less sheltered? Because you went from private school with 3 older brothers watching out for you.
Yeah.
And then you went right to private college. So how not opened were your eyes to the world around you? How sheltered were you? And then when did that start to shift?
Well, I wouldn't say I was, too sheltered to the point where I didn't understand the world. That was one thing my parents did teach us very much. My dad was really big on traveling. We would travel together as a family, but we would just get in a minivan and we would do, drives down to this part of, the state and then turn around and go to other places. So my parents opened my eyes to reality versus, fact versus fiction. My parents were very open on, when you see somebody who might be homeless on the street, don't automatically assume that that person is addicted to drugs and they've just given up on life. My dad was a veteran, so he talked about when they came back from Vietnam, why a lot of them that are on the street are Vietnam veterans, because of the fact that pretty much when they came back, they were treated like garbage. And so they opened my eyes to that. Now, when I went to Pittsburgh, I would say it was a different viewpoint of just, I want to say like racial differences. Growing up in New Jersey, I had somebody in class who could have been Hispanic sitting next to me, somebody who was Native American, somebody who was Asian. Race wasn't really brought to my attention as much until I went to Pittsburgh. And that's when it kind of knocked me off my feet. And I realized the major differences in the world, as opposed to, it's very different, very, very different. It's not, I went to prom with somebody who was German, but then I also had, one of my close friends is Italian. It was not like an issue. We understood each other's family. We respected each other's culture. We didn't have that dislike for one another. And we even talk about it now when I connect with a lot of them, how much our society has changed and how we were kind of, in a sense, almost all of us were sheltered in that private school because we were given advantages of interacting with multiple cultures and we didn't really get to see what else was out there in the world. So after college, we kind of all, I want to say everybody in my school, it was 27 of us that graduated. All of us that kind of said, wow, this is this is kind of, amazing that this is happening like this, and sad at the same time.
I think that's something that's really common. I was born in 70, so quite a bit before you, but we were raised exactly like you said, just multicultural. I grew up in a Portuguese neighborhood, and there was never any thought given to different cultures or different races or like nothing. It was just accepted. And I think that's because when people come from other countries and they kind of settle into New England, which is pretty common, we get each other. Everyone kind of gets each other because they may have come from a different country and settled, but they've done that same process. So yeah. I don't remember, I wasn't raised, and I'm wondering if this is similar with you. I wasn't raised to not be prejudiced. It didn't exist. Prejudice just didn't exist. It wasn't a conversation we had because nobody was mean to someone else based on their skin color or their culture, ever. And yeah. I didn't know it existed until my second year of college when I moved out west, and it was against people that were Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Hawaii and I was the blonde one and it was against me. And then I moved to the South and it was against people of color. And I thought, holy cow, this is everywhere. But New England tends to be this pocket of complete acceptance. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you found also?
Yeah. We had acceptance. We had multicultural days at school, and mm-hmm. We would have block parties, and we would get to eat Hispanic food. We would get to eat right. Jamaican food. We weren't like biased to it. And you're right. It was not until you kind of leave that area. And I want to say, like, New Jersey has those small towns, mm-hmm. and it's like in the small towns when I was growing up, I could walk down the street and I could point to multiple different people that I knew.
Right.
It's not really the same now. Of course, I've been gone too long, and it's just changed overall. But it seemed like that's kind of lost. That small town. It's not really that small, but like we just had that relationship with one another, mm-hmm. and we didn't disrespect one another. And I feel like that. You're right. I'm in Maryland. They don't want to. A lot of people don't like to call Maryland the South, but it is the South. It's past the Mason-Dixon line, so it is the South. But even here, it's very prevalent. There are areas that you can go to that you could tell there's a majority in that area. And you won't get the stares necessarily, but you're aware of where you are.
It's very different. It's so sad because I wasn't Portuguese, and man, those women could cook, and I loved growing up in a Portuguese. My mother could not cook. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was cool. It was fun that everybody was different, and that was something that was the common thread, that we were all so different. I think growing up, I was in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And it's sad that we've lost that. And that was part of the safety and going from houses to house. Man, you did not mess with those women. Yeah. Nobody would have messed with any of us, because those Portuguese moms or Italian moms. So tell me a little bit about the Nigerian input in your background. And you were raised more inner city, but you were in a private school. So there's a complete dichotomy there. Yeah. So I have all these questions.
Okay. So, my dad made sure, unfortunately, I'm not really good with the language, but overall, my dad made sure that he instilled certain things from him that he was raised with, which is respecting of the elders, respect your culture, don't forget your culture, don't forget ever from where you came from. So every time I go back to New Jersey, I stop by my old house. I stop by and I see my friends. I always, call my friends. I remember the people who were there for me all those times ago. And the people who, are there for me now. But he never wanted me to forget those people. It's like if you ever, one day hit Mega Millions or win the lottery, those are the people that got you to the point where you got from point A to point B. So you can't forget them. He also really pushed in us, just making sure that we manage our money well and don't spend it on something that you don't need. My father was very tight with his money. He still is. But it was like, if you don't need it, don't buy it. And, he really just influenced education. He really pushes for us to learn and just continue to read and continue to just be aware of things around us and aware of the environment and the people that are around us. Him and my mom always kind of pushed us to kind of go off of our internal feelings. Like if we connect with somebody, we don't feel that we have a connection with them. We're just like, oh, that person's a little bit off. My dad's like, stay away. Yeah. Stay away.
That's an amazing thing to teach. And so out of curiosity, how have you carried the financial thing? Because as time's gone on since you were raised, consumerism is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. I'm a minimalist, so I don't buy anything I don't need, and it doesn't even bother me not to buy stuff. But that's a really hard thing for people. How is that transferred into your life now?
Well, I'm, something I got from my mom is when I was a kid, I used to be so angry whenever I went to the grocery store with my mother. She would have this big old thick envelope of coupons. And, my mom would always say, when you get older, you're laughing at this now, but when you get older, you will say to me, oh, I understand why you had that big pack. As I've gotten older, I did go through that time where, in college, they threw the credit cards at you. But then I started looking at my finances and I said, wait a minute, I plan on buying a house. So I have goals that I set for myself. And I know that in order for me to meet those goals, one of the things that I cannot have hanging over me is finances. So I went ahead and paid off all the credit cards and I got rid of them. And I kept 2 credit cards that I have, the limits are like $300 on, nothing major. When I buy things, my friends that know me, they're like, oh, Olivia is cheap. I am cheap. I will be happy to be cheap. I'm cheap when it comes to buying those things, but I'm also, am smart about how I buy things. So I can still buy I'm not going to buy detergent that I know is not going to wash my clothes. I can still buy like the Tide, but I'm going to buy it with a coupon, or I'm going to buy it when it's on sale, and then I bulk buy. So before I had my kids, I had a pretty decent stash of items, probably about 1 room full. And then as they have begun to get older, that stash has dwindled down and we're starting to, pick it back up again. But what I just reevaluated. I say to myself whenever I purchase things now, is it something that I need and I'm not going to regret later? And am I going to be angry at myself that I spent the money on it?
So tell me about meeting your husband, and you do have 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
So I met my husband actually for one semester before I went to LaRoche College. I was at Hood College in Maryland. And I actually met my husband there. He was friends with another girl that at the time I was friends with, lived in the dorm building. So he was their best friends. And he came up first he would call and just talk to her over the phone, and I would be in her room sometimes and I would answer the phone. And we would just have like a 5-minute conversation if she wasn't there. And it became more and more frequent to the point where he was like, well, you know what? We're having these conversations. Let me just get your phone number. And so he would call me sometimes. He would, then call her. And it was like we had a friendship. Came up to visit at the school. We interacted. And then later on, it got to the point where one time he was like, wouldn't it be funny if, I think I remember I said to him, wouldn't it be funny if, she was my best friend at the time. I said, well, wouldn't it be funny if, I'm her best friend and, you're her best friend, and then we got together. Wouldn't that be funny? He was like, no, because I've liked you since day one. And the next day after that, we started dating. So it kind of began that process together.
Wow. Okay. So what a cool way to meet somebody. How did your best friend react?
She was not happy at first. Because she really didn't want, I guess, now those lines were drawn. It used to be before where she could say something about him to me, and then she could say something. It was like now she knew that she couldn't get into that middle. She got a little bit angry. Now I don't interact with her anymore, or he still talks to her, but I don't. But it mainly came down to the fact that she felt like she was losing her friends because we would do things together and we didn't invite her. So that friendship, she struggled with understanding. We're together in a relationship. We're no longer like, I can't take you on an event with me and then leave him at home. We're dating. So it was a little bit difficult for her to understand.
So tell me about your kids.
So I have my 2 boys. They are unique in so many different ways. Both of them have 2 different personalities. You have the one that's kind of to himself, and he's more of a bookie type kid. So he likes to read books. He's big on science right now. He likes to figure out how things work. So he asks a lot of questions about, oh, well, how can I do this? And how can I do that? And he's really big right now on learning about the earth and the world and the moon and the stars. And my other son is more, we always call him like more of the sporty type kid. He's very outspoken. He goes to a room and you can see him walk in the door, very lively, very active, always bouncing around and doing something. And he's more of like the video game kid. So he can figure out how to play a video game, and, how to figure out how to get a certain character or cheats within a game. So their minds work differently when it comes to things. One's an outside kid, one's an indoor kid, but it works well with the 2 of them together.
And how old are they?
They're 6 and 7.
Okay. So tell me about your biggest struggles, because I kind of know a little bit about what they are.
Well, a lot of the biggest struggles that I've had is working in Maryland. In the area that I am, there are other therapists who are women of color there, but they're not really prevalent in working with the LGBTQ community. And so I have gotten some backlash from it, and just working with, polyamorous couples. Maryland doesn't always want to come off as a very, Maryland, I want to say overall, is kind of a very religious area. You have some people who say, oh no, I work with all populations, but we already know that they don't. I've talked to therapists behind closed doors who are like, I don't know how you can work with that population. And it's a struggle because like they're people. And you're looking at them based off of one thing. You know, if it's a person that comes there is polyamorous, they're coming there for they don't want judgment. They want to feel like that they can come to you and not get judgment. But you give them judgment as soon as you answer the phone and say, no, I don't work with that population. And they, you know, I feel like that therapists don't ever try. So that's usually the struggle that I have is being able to, one, find therapists who as when I can refer somebody to somebody, I have to have a connection with them. I have to feel like I know that person, that they're actually a good person. It's always a struggle of really finding that therapist that's like, oh, they're a good person. At the same time, just being accepted within the community. I'm young, I understand that. A lot of the therapists in the area are way older. And there's some therapists around my age, but you know, the ones who are have been in the field a lot of time, they don't look at the younger generation and say, oh, they're a good therapist. They look at them like, oh, here are these young kids that don't have this experience. Right. So it's always that struggle of trying to find that acceptance and understanding within the community, and just amongst therapists overall.
So your struggle at work is more among your peers than it is among the people that you are counseling.
Yeah, it's not, you know, the population, I love working with the population, and my clients, I love working with them. It's more of the outside population, the therapists in the area. It's sad because we are in a field where we're there to help people, but sometimes we forget about considering one another, and listening to one another. And a lot of therapists will say whatever they want to say and not think or wonder about the actual person that you're talking to. And that's a lot of times the struggle with this field is just that people don't listen to one another.
So how did you start working with the populations that you're working with? Because like you said, a lot of therapists don't.
Mm-hmm. So, excuse me, I was always working with heterosexual couples. I did that when I was at a outpatient mental health clinic. But I started working more with the LGBTQ plus community because I had a friend who identified as a transgender. And she was dealing with a lot of difficulty with acceptance from other people, even acceptance from a therapist. Like, she didn't feel as though when she went to her therapist, she actually listened to her. There were always gender therapists around, but because of where, and at the time we were in Pittsburgh, because of where we were at, she couldn't really find that therapist that she needed. So she felt sheltered and closed off, like, you know, well, who can I go to? And I saw that, and I was trying to figure out why it was so hard for her. And when I started going into therapy, it was a lot of times from when I was in the criminal justice field as well. So I had my friend who was transgender. Then I was working in group homes, and a lot of the kids that were in the group home identified as either gay or lesbian. And when I would talk to them, I would ask them about why they, you know, were in the group home. A lot of them is because, you know, their parents just said, I can't deal with them anymore. Their behaviors are out of control. But it wasn't really that. It fell under the lack of acceptance from their family putting them out, kids lashing out because they didn't have a voice and they didn't have anybody to talk to. And I became kind of that person in the group home, but I didn't have the qualifications for it at the time when I was there. I only had the bachelor's degree. So I went off and first started with the criminal justice degree because I wanted to understand the criminal justice system and how these kids were getting looped into the system without acknowledging their mental health issues. And then I went into the mental health field to kind of tie it all together. And now I have a better understanding of why some individuals who are adults have become adults because they were not criminals, but they were involved in criminal activity when they were kids. And I just work with the population to understand and be there for them. You know, I'm an ally to the population, but I'm there to support them.
Holy cow. So that was a really an indirect route to how you started doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So as far as working, you have this challenge to meet the needs of a community that's not having their needs met in lots of ways. Is that a challenge to you?
It is, because, sadly, a lot of therapists don't go for the necessary training. And if somebody is coming to you and they are dealing with anxiety and you're an anxiety specialist, you should be able to work with somebody because they identify as being gay or lesbian or bisexual. It shouldn't be, well, I can't really work with them because they are gay, lesbian, or bisexual, even though their issue is something that I specialize in. And that's what I hear a lot. I don't specialize in every avenue of, mental health diagnosis that a person may have. So I do have to refer out a lot. But I always try to make sure that the client is aware, like, when you find that person, that therapist, make sure that they're actually going to be working with you for you and not based off of anything else that they may look to and say, well, I don't agree with it. I hear a lot of, I don't agree with it, but I'll work with them. That's not, it's not helping them. Why do you want to work with them? Have you ever interacted with the population before? Have you, been there when they've gone through their struggles? Like, how can you justify helping if you haven't even tried to walk in their shoes? Not saying we can ever feel them, but just even walk next to them.
How easy was it or difficult was it for you to start from where you came from? And I understand your curiosity because of the criminal background and having friends and stuff, but you're a heterosexual couple. Mm-hmm. What were the difficulties in understanding this other population that can sometimes be quite different? And you're right, it has other mental health issues. Was that pretty easy for you, or what were your struggles with that?
It was pretty easy for me because of the fact that I have been around individuals who have been in the population before. So I didn't view it as this is like a new population, like the same way where I looked at it from race. I had been around somebody who, I've had, my best friend was Asian, and, I had been around the Asian family and their cultures and their understanding. So if I interact with somebody who is Asian, I know not to automatically assume that that person is Chinese when they could be Filipino. It was not ever a concern because I had been exposed to it before and I had accepted it. I feel like a large part of people's lack of understanding is that they don't interact with other people. They don't learn from other people. We have to learn in order to grow. For example, like some therapists I've worked with have told me, I don't even understand why I have to use the pronoun of she when they're not a she. Well, that is what they have asked you to use. It is their, God-given right to use that pronoun. And you respect that person and you use their pronoun. And that is how they identify. It's not based off of what you feel like they should identify. It's how they identify themselves. And so it's really a struggle it wasn't really a struggle getting into the community and working with the community. They knew that it was coming from a place within my heart. It was more harder for the clinicians to understand it overall than actually the clients themselves.
Got it. And you're right. Coming from the cultural background like you did, it's just a different culture for you. So that makes perfect sense. So what's your biggest struggle? There's a lot of work that can be done.
Yeah.
With all the letters behind your name. Yeah. What's your struggle with balancing that with your family?
Well, it was a struggle when I first went into practice. I mean, I was working on the weekends at times. I was seeing clients late at night and coming home at 8, 9 o'clock at night. And my husband, sat me down and said, you can't help everybody. You just have to set some boundaries with yourself because we also have kids as well. And they're a priority. You won't get this time back. And so I evaluated everything. I went and I got myself an incredible secretary. I went ahead and I moved office spaces to somewhere that, basically was my space. I was sharing a space before. And I got my own space, my own door, own key. And then I cut back my hours. So now I only work Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I don't work Fridays so that I can just either take care of the house or watch my shows with my feet up. I don't work Mondays so that I can do the same thing. I go to my kids' school sometime, and we'll either hang out with them in the cafeteria, or anytime they have a school activity, I've made sure that either I am there or my husband is there. And if either one of us can't go because of work, obligations, my mom will actually go and she will be there. So we make sure that the kids know somebody's going to be there for you when you need something. And I usually am done I go in at 9 and I'm done with my last client at 6:45 and I'm back home. And this is the pattern that I've had. And I made sure when I step in the house, except for with my book, and I will admit that with my book, when I've stepped in the house, I've had to work on it. But before my book, when I walk in the house, that's it. I don't pull out my phone and do any notes or anything anymore. I put that away. My kids know work is at work. And when I come home, I'm at home. On the weekends, they have my undivided attention and time.
I love this. I think as a therapist, you probably see this far more than I do, especially as women, especially as moms, especially as people who work, right? We don't value self-care anymore, or setting boundaries, or saying no. I have no problem saying no. But how long does it take us to get to the point where we're comfortable saying no to stuff? And it's not because I can't or I'm busy. It's because I don't want to, because it's not a priority. So how hard was it for you to make that shift? Because that's a big one for women.
Yeah, it was hard for me to do it at first, because it was, I was starting off the business, and I said, I have to have these hours open. I felt like I have to, in order for me to meet certain needs financially, as well as get my name out in the community. So when people would call and say, oh, well, can you come and have a session at 8:00? I would just say, oh yeah, sure. It wasn't like, no, I can't, because I have a family at home and I'm going to be tired when I wake up the next morning for my next client. I've even adjusted it even more. I used to go in at 8:00, and I stopped going in that early for safety reasons, because I would get out there so early and it's so dark. And I'm not that tall, but I'm a female just walking into my office by myself. So I stopped it. I said, no, I'm gonna set these certain boundaries, and I'm gonna stick to them. And my secretary has been really good with making sure that I stay with those boundaries. I told her when I hired her, I need to make sure that if you don't see me having lunch on a day, you need to make sure you add it in there. So she puts it in my schedule. And if a client calls and says, hey, does she have any time? That's the only time I have open. She would tell them, no, she does not have any time open. It was very, very hard, because I felt like I was failing my clients at the same time. But then I reevaluated myself, and I realized, I said, I'm not going to be any good for my clients if I'm not good for myself. So when I go back to work on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'm well rested. My mind is clear. I'm ready to, listen and be there and support them, instead of me feeling like I have to do it. And when I moved it from me being an obligation of I have to I want to, or that I can, it changed my overlook overall.
How happy was your husband? Well, first of all, he was kind of right. And we all like to be right. You need to set boundaries. You're right.
Yeah.
Because this is a common conversation in all relationships about, because he's right, and we all know it. You never get that time back. And I have no problem telling people, I can't do that at that time, because I really like you and the opportunity, but I like my family more. Mm-hmm. And that's hard for people to wrap their minds around. I think, how? Why did I have this family if they weren't a top priority?
Well, we both evaluated ourselves. My husband used to work 2 jobs at one point, and we evaluated ourselves and why we were doing it. And it was like, okay, well, if it's for finances, we can cut certain things. We can use coupons for certain things. We sat down and we really just had a conversation. It's an example, like the things that I have put in my book, I kind of used myself with me and my husband. So we talked about it. And he said, I'm going to stop this job. I'm going to get another job where I have one job that's a better paying job. And I'm going to be more involved, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there in the evening so that we can have dinner all together, and we can, do things on the weekend, and we can, go on long trips if we want to go on a long trip. But I'm going to make sure that I make the changes. We reevaluated ourselves because we noticed that with our kids that, I look at like their behaviors, and they weren't having any problems in school or anything like that. But I didn't want them to ever feel like when I talk to them, oh, mommy has to get her tablet out, and I got to wait for mommy to finish this tablet to talk to me. I wanted them to know that they had my undivided attention, and he wanted that at the same time. So we reevaluated ourselves, and when I went into my career, he also went into his career change. And now we're at a point where we give that time to our kids. So like right now, we're doing the session right now. They're at school.
Right. And that's how, I set my hours from 9:30 in the morning because that's when the youngest is gone at 9:05. Mm-hmm. So usually I have that almost a half an hour to breathe and figure myself out. And then I am done. I will not schedule past 1:30 because if it's an hour and a half, I need to be done by 3 because that's when my kids walk in from the bus. So my schedule is my kids' schedule for the most part. There are some exceptions, but for the most part. And yeah, usually Fridays are my lowest key day. So I absolutely agree. And you have to, women, especially women, we need to prioritize what's important. And I didn't have these kids for them to be the ones that needed to go to therapy. Yeah. That'd be terrible for you. So you've alluded to it. You've mentioned a couple times. You have a book coming out November 1st, which is coming right up.
Yeah.
So tell me all about this, because being a published author is a pretty big deal.
It is. This was a book that I really started the book originally because when I work with my clients, I give them homework, and everybody's like, oh, you give out homework. Well, I give you this because I don't want you to feel like the only day that you work on yourself is when you come into therapy for that 45-minute hour session that we have. That's not enough. You have to work on yourself every day. And so I used to give clients worksheets, but I was sitting down with one of my clients, and I had to change the pronouns in a workbook that was for clients who were having postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and mood disorder. I'm sorry. So I had to change the pronouns in the workbook, and I didn't like that, and it irritated me. And I would do that, not just with that workbook. I realized I was doing this with wedding material that I was using. If I got worksheets from other organizations that I felt were really good, I either had to change the pronouns or either the topics or even the words. If the words were too big, and I had a client who had an 8th grade education level, they're not going to be able to read a book that's, has these really big words in it. And so I got annoyed. I said, somebody should just make a complete workbook that can be just for every type of population. Because I work with polyamorous couples. They have their own workbooks or worksheets in it and chapter where it talks about just in general having an understanding and an agreement when you're looking for another partner. And just the wording, just put in there partners instead of just a couple or, you and your husband, you and your wife. And that's how the workbook came up. So I pretty much was able to finish it in 2 months. It's over 200 pages of just worksheets that I have used. And I actually had to stop myself from putting more in it. And it's exciting. So I'm glad that I was able to finish. Let me show you a photo of it. I was glad I was able, and my little stickers. But I was glad I was able to finish it because in reality, it really needed to be done. It really, really needed to be done. Now people won't feel like that in order for them to get a premarital counseling workbook that they have to find it and scratch out certain pronouns or they have to, look at it and say, oh, well, this is for a heterosexual couple. So, it's a he and she pronoun in here, but we'll just scratch it off. It hurts people.
So it's called Before I Do.
Mm-hmm. It's Before I Do. It's a complete premarital counseling workbook for heterosexual, LGBTQ, and polyamorous couples.
So you have different sections. So if I bought it and I'm heterosexual compared to to someone else that was a polyamorous couple, we would do different sections of the workbook. Is that how you did it?
No, you can do the whole workbook. Basically, I made it so that it's for everybody. There are topics in there, and it'll say in there, for polyamorous couples. You can skip that question. Talk about religion. So the chapters overall, there includes marriage preparation. So we talk about expectations and assumptions in marriage. We always assume, I assumed my husband was going to cook dinner because he knew I was coming home late. You can't assume. You have to communicate. I talk about infidelity, household roles in here, and we discuss, if you're a person who's LGBTQ, your house and you were raised in the LGBTQ household, your roles will look different as opposed to a heterosexual person, but you may not identify within that population. So understanding the expectation that your partner has. Chores, friendship. I talk about friendship in here. Again, I put a little bit of my life in here. What if your friends become a problem in your marriage? What are you going to do then? Sex and intimacy, your expectations with sex and intimacy, and what your partner wants, what your partner likes. I get a lot of couples who come in there, and their issues are largely around sex and intimacy, children, and finances. And all of those things are talked about in this workbook. Death and dying we talk about as well. Nobody wants to think about it, but it happens. It's the guarantee that we have in life. Second marriages, we have a section on just for polyamorous partners, but anybody can do it because it talks about just having an understanding within your relationship of what type of rules and guidelines and boundaries you want to have. Disability and illness. So I have some issues that not most premarital counseling books talk about, but I talk about disability and illness. People get into car accidents. People get diagnosed with mental health illnesses. A lot of people who are in the military, this is a section that they will work on as well if they, do become disabled. Personal space and quality time I talk about in here. Yes, everybody needs and deserves their individual time. I talk about interracial relationships. So being aware of your own internal bias that you may have in regards to the race, if you notice that your family feels a certain way. Interreligious relationships, stepchildren. Some people have stepchildren. Have you even created a bond with that person or those children? Infertility, and I talk about postpartum mood and anxiety disorder as well, because there's not a lot of support there. Before you get married, you don't think that could happen to your partner, but it can. And I even have a list in there about just asking family members to, hey, I know you want to hold the baby, but can you do the chores? Can you help clean up? In-laws, I talk about that and the struggle there. Communication, having a military partner, self-esteem. That's also a topic that is in there, as a chapter on that, because in our relationships, sometimes when partners gain weight, lose weight, their self-esteem is attacked, and that causes some issues. It's like, well, they always talk bad about themselves, and I'm sick of hearing it. Well, how about you boost them up? How about you be there to support them? And also talk about domestic violence. The reality of it is that it does happen in relationships beforehand. People get married and they say they were never like this. They were like this from day one. You just weren't aware that they were like this. And then I talk about addiction as well. And then I also talk about suicide. So those topics
are cow. Yeah, I'd say that's comprehensive. Holy cow. I am so impressed because I've never heard, I didn't have an issue with postpartum depression, for example, but I did go through infertility. Like there's things that you just don't even know. You don't know to ask if you don't know to ask or talk about. There are a lot of subjects in there that you would never even think to ask, because until it comes up, it's not an issue, but how are you going to handle it if it is an issue? Yeah. Holy cow. What did you want to add that you didn't, that you stopped yourself? What's book 2? Olivia, tell me what book 2 is.
I can't, not yet. It's probably already gotten an extra 40 pages in book 2. I go deeper into the topics. There's more worksheets that we talk about. There's more issues that, is discussed. And with my clients, whenever I meet with them and if I give them worksheets, A lot of times I create it myself, or either I try to find it from different places that don't meet all the expectations that I have. So I think like that. I love worksheets. I don't know why. I'm just a person that likes to do that type of hands-on work. And this is 200 pages worth of the items. So out of all of the chapters, which were majority of them, or the introduction, are probably about a page each. The rest of it is just worksheets.
So, well, I love it because I am a huge supporter. We journal. Mm-hmm. We journal, and I love journal programs. Our kids have little books that even our 7-year-olds, just write about your day. I think that introspection, that thought process about you and where you're at and your day and where you want to be and setting goals. And like you said, with therapy, you're not doing work for an hour a week. Mm-hmm. If that, I mean, if that's how much you're going to see a therapist. And I think that some things can be done, especially in conjunction with a therapist, but you can continue that self-improvement, that self-care, so I understand I think the work pages, those, having those done, mm-hmm. It's just like, it's guided journaling in my mind.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So for my coaching, I actually hired someone she has a guided journaling, that's her business. And she did these PDFs for me because sometimes we don't know what to write about.
Yeah.
So, worksheets, that's a way to do guided journaling in a self-improvement. How awesome is that? But you're doing it for couples before they get married. Mm-hmm. That's huge.
And when I sent out so I sent the draft out to a lot of people, mm-hmm. and some of the couples that I sent them to were divorced, were currently married. So I wanted to get a viewpoint from all around. And I was actually surprised. A lot of people who were divorced said, I actually read some of the questions to my ex and fixed an issue that we had after we got divorced, because I read it and then we talked about it and we asked each other the questions. It was like, well, if we would have known this, could we have still been married? And even people who were married read it and said, I learned something about my partner I had no idea about. So it's not just for people who, go through premarital counseling. It's also for people, if you're even thinking about going and marrying somebody or asking somebody to get married, find out what their expectations are. It's mainly just finding out people's expectations, communicating with one another. And the more that you know about your partner, the less likely you're going to have arguments that lead to or could potentially lead to divorce.
I think I read an article once about prenups that were done that were not financial. And it was like, and I don't know how true this is, but it resonated with me. So Bill Gates' wife said that they had to have a date night once a week, and that at a certain time of day, he had to shut off all technology. And I thought that was so interesting because we'll talk about prenuptial agreements all day long for finances. Mm-hmm. But we never talk about what being married is the biggest contract you can do with another person.
Yep.
That's not a very warm, fuzzy way to look at it, but it's the biggest contract you can do. It is the most intimate contract, and it's the one that we discuss the least. So if I'm getting hired from you, you're going to give me a job description, and we're going to sign it as an agreement that this is your part and this is my part and this is how we'll evaluate. And we never do that in relationships. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of the prenup agreement that's emotional, I thought, God, that's the best idea you could ever do in a relationship. And mm-hmm. you've taken self-journaling and pre-marriage therapy and emotional prenup and created a book about it. Mm-hmm. I'm totally in love with this idea. So we all need to buy it November 1st. Where are you going to be on Amazon?
I will be on Amazon, but I'm actually selling it at a discounted rate on my website, which is liferevisionscom, where you can purchase the book, and you can do also a pre-order. I'm having a launch that's actually going to be happening in Ellicott City, Maryland. where people can come and meet me and, ask questions. But until then, they can purchase the book on the website.
That is excellent. So how excited were your parents about this?
Well, my dad was a little bit, he was excited, but he wasn't too excited when he got to the sex and intimacy part. As everybody can imagine, he's like, what's going on here? What type of questions are you? Whereas my mom, she was thrilled. She was like, this is really a good book. These questions in here are good questions. And I have to remind my dad, like, Dad, I'm 33 years old. I'm a grown woman. Like, I'm not a child. I have kids. So it's understandable that I would be able to answer this section without a problem. But he still is. I think he kind of skipped over that whole part. Like, no, I'm not gonna read that part.
That's awesome. Well, because they're so into education, and what you're doing is taking every population and giving them the opportunity to have a tremendous amount of education.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind.
Yeah, and that part they were excited about. They really were.
So when you sent the book out and you had people look into it, mm-hmm. And read it and give you feedback, how much growth did you see? This is worksheets and a book outside of therapy. Yeah. And a lot can be done in therapy, but how much growth did you see in feedback? How great was that?
It was great. I mean, I was waiting for the negative feedback, but I didn't get the negative feedback. I got a lot of positive feedback that was like, this is very thorough. And one person who, or the two people who were clinicians that read it, they were like, this could put me out of work, this book, because they don't need to come to me. They can just read the book. And it's not really detailed as far as like big introduction sections. It's more of the worksheets and the questions, which all come up in therapy. So it really it surprised me. And, I was actually really surprised by it because I didn't feel it was something that took me a long time to do. It didn't feel like it was something that I had a struggle with. Most book writers feel like they have a struggle, but I just kept, oh, well, how about this? Let me include this, or let me include that. And it just came to me, which let me know that this was the right thing to do.
Well, it was also based on everything you were seeing with all of your patients.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything that was an issue in any therapy session would instantly be an opportunity for worksheets, because it's a worksheet for them to continue their growth while they're not seeing you, like you mm-hmm. said. And then, it's an opportunity to have it in the book. And now, like you said, if you're creating all of them, why not compile them at the same time? This is so exciting.
Yeah.
It's really exciting because I read the information about it, but it didn't totally click until you were describing it. So how mm-hmm. fantastic. So Olivia, to wrap things up, people can find you at liferevisions.com. Is that the easiest place? That's the easiest place to get the book, but is that the easiest place to connect with you?
Yeah, it is for right now. They can always send me an email at oldbaylor@liferevisions.com. I'm in the process of having my own website created, which is www.oliviabaylor.com. So hopefully by the time this airs, it will be done. But if not, the Life Revisions website, so Life Revisions LLC will be where you can access. And, if you have questions, when I do speaking engagements, if you want to find out about that, I'm also on Facebook as well. And I'm trying to get into the other places, but I think I'll stick with Facebook.
I always tell people, don't push. Stick with what you're gonna do and that you're good at. Don't worry about everything else. It's not hurting you now. Yeah. So now, will you also, as a side note, take therapy clients that are not anywhere near Maryland? You said you do some of your stuff, but will you do that strictly?
Well, the only people who are not in Maryland that I'm allowed to see are like military individuals, and that's through their insurance company. Okay. And that's primarily either it's through their insurance or it was somebody who I've seen and I, have called the insurance and I've gotten special clearance for, and I called the board and gotten special clearance for them. But other than that, they have to be within the state of Maryland. I will travel to other states to do presentations on it. But as far as clientele, I can't actually see clients who are outside of a state that I'm not licensed.
Got it. I just wanted to clarify that and make sure. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening in to Jen Taylor Rerouting. Like, share, and of course, comment. I welcome input with attitude. Get a copy of my book on Amazon, Hello, My Name is Warrior Princess, or check out my website, jentaylor.net. And if you still want more, sign up for one of my coaching packages.